Okay, then we're going to start. What is it? Mem Aleph? Mem Aleph on the base, right? 41b. It's not halfway down. It's a little under halfway down. It's Lefikach on 41b. We think Hashem that they're able to learn Torah every day. It's about learning. Should have base of Mikdash immediately. Learning also for Shleima. Needs my father, Sali ben Bela, and Simcha Shalom. Oh, Yaakov ben Fega is Yankel. And any news how he's doing? And Daniel Simcha Shalom Hakayan Ben
Hannah.
Ben Chana.
Thank you.
Okay, we should have her for Shleima.
Amen.
Good news.
Amen.
Okay. So in the Mishnah we had a contrast between kabbanos that were brought on the outer altar and kabbanos that were brought on the inner altar. Kabbanos that are brought on the outer altar, so then only one application of the blood was necessary. So that was the one that would make pigel. The other ones was wouldn't make pigel, according to Beis Hillel. Not only according to Beis Hillel by the Chatas. However, on the Mizbeach HaPnimi, on the inner altar, every single application of blood was necessary, was essential. And so therefore, if what we're learning now is this quote from the Mishnah, if all of them were done properly, but one wasn't, then you would assume it would conclude that it would be pigel, but it just concludes puzzle, and vein bekaris. Now we have to figure out why is it puzzle, vein bekaris? Really, it should be pigel. Each one is essential. So then, if you have thoughts of pigel by any one of the applications of the blood, it should be pigel. So the Gemara says, Tanan Hasam. We learned over there, pigel b'kaimetz v'lei b'levayna. Let's say, when it comes to a carbon mincha, there are several parts that are matir, that allow the carbon mincha to be acceptable. That one of them is the kaimetz, the scoop that's done by the kain. Another one is the levina, the frankincense, which is also burnt on the altar. But levina v'lei b'kaimetz. Let's say he has thoughts when taking the levina, or when burning the levina, and not by the kaimetz. So what he did was he didn't have the full pigel thoughts throughout the matirin, throughout the entire service. Meir says pigel v'che'evan alav kares. He says that's good enough. That's already pigel. Pigel means that it's invalid. The Chachamim, very, very invalid. The Chachamim say ein b'kares ad sheyifaga b'chol hamata. The Chachamim say no, that you need to have everything that's allowing this sacrifice or this mincha to be eligible. Needs to be all the thoughts all the way through need to be pigel in order for it to be pigel. It has to be b'kol hamater, and all that's allowing it to be acceptable. Over here, he only thought by the kaimetz, by the scoop. He didn't think about by the frankincense, so it's not kol hamater. So the Chachamim would say it's not pigel. Now this would explain, going back to the Mishnah. You go back to the Mishnah where we said that if you have thoughts by any one of the applications of blood by a sacrifice that's brought into the sanctuary, right? So each application of blood is essential. So we would think that it would become pigel, but we say no, it just becomes puzzle. It becomes invalid but not pigel. Now what the explanation is, because it's not b'kol hamater, you only had it by one of them. You need to make it pigel, you need to have thoughts by all of them. Yeah. You had a question, David?
Oh, I thought I heard you yesterday. Talking about how certain sacrifices for Kippur you're talking about.
On Yom Kippur, it's actually also brought, but there's other sacrifices that are brought into the sanctuary. Yeah. There's a few of them. I'm Reb Shimon ben Lakish. I'm going to spend much of this morning discussing the statement from Reb Shimon ben Lakish. So you don't want to miss this one. I'm Reb Shimon ben Lakish.
Excuse me, is that view that has to be, your thoughts have to be incorrect about the entire avoda, all four? Is that a generally held opinion?
So, Kol Hamater, yeah, except for there's a dissenting opinion, but that's the main opinion is that Yifagel b'chol Hamater, and the other form is Ein Mefagel b'chatzi Hamater. We'll see, it's going to come up over here. Yeah. Amr Shimon ben Lakish, Loi Tema, don't say the time of the Rameir, the Kasava Shem Mefagel b'chatzi Hamater. Don't say that the reason for a mayor is that Rameir we just had in the Brisa said that in the Mishnah somewhere. Where's the Mishnah? In Menachos. Don't say that the reason why thoughts of pigul by the kaimetz but not by the levina, but by the levina but not by the kaimetz is going to be pigul. Don't say that the mayor holds that because he holds that you don't need to have the whole matter. He actually holds that you need the whole matter. Really? So how does he say that only one of them, thoughts by one of them is pigul? He explains, Rameir saying, when he did the kaimetz, when he was burning the kaimetz, he did it with thoughts of pigul. And the levina, the frankincense, he did in silence. I just want to point out that Rashi over here, this is the Rashi that I've been quoting, over the last few weeks, that Kol Machshava, if you look in the Rashi, you go down, 8 lines, it says, V'chol Machshava dekadshem moitzi bepehu. See that? It means that whenever we say machshava, we actually don't mean machshava, we mean speech. That means that the Kayan was actually talking to himself, but he was talking. When he would say, I'm doing this l'shem for this, I'm l'shem matzos mitzvah, so he's saying l'shem to bring the meat, to sprinkle the blood, everything. It was all talk, all speaking. Just look at Taisvus and Daf Beis. I guess it's going to.
Which Tosos?
I'm not sure. Divra Maskal Kol. And then Daf Daled. Machshava.
Well, at least this explains how someone knows that something has gone wrong.
It's not because we need testimony. It's not because of that. It's just what's affecting the validity of it. Is it his thought or his speech? Rashi holds that it's a speech.
What I'm saying is, if it's all about thought and nothing more, usually most people having a thought are not necessarily going to catch that the thought is wrong. They think it's right. That's why they're thinking it.
Right.
We talked about having, a GoPro or something. There's no way. How could you know from a machshava by itself? It's too much. Even with a checklist. I'm
viewing it like forgetting Yalav Yavai. He forgot to say Yalav Yavai, but he remembers after Shemona Esrei that he heard someone else mentioning something. He's like, "Oy, I forgot." So he did the carbon. He says, "Oy, this was a shlamim. I did it wrong." It makes sense. It makes sense because he's not responsible to pay. So he'll be honest. In other words, he's not making money off it. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's a good point. Okay. So Reb Shimon ben Lakish says that don't say that the reason for Reb Meir is because Mefagel Mechatzi Amater. Rather, what's the reason? We're talking about where he did the Kaimetz b'machshava and Lavaina was b'shtika. Kasava, Reb Meir holds, whoever does any action, he always does it because of his first thought. So what we're talking about here is that he did the Kaimetz first, and he had thoughts of Pigel. So when he does the Lavaina silently, that's following his initial thought. Whatever his initial thought. That's why when it comes to tefillin and writing and get and anything else, and even in Shemon Esrei actually, that your initial thought that you have at the first bracha, that's the kavanah. So the main kavanah is when you start. What am I doing this for? Before you start making the tzitzis, you say l'shem mitzvah tzitzis, l'shem mitzvah tzitzis. Before you start tying the tefillin or something, you say l'shem kedushas tefillin, and that's enough. Your first thought is good enough. You don't have to repeat it every second. So what your initial thought is good. So what Reb Meir is saying here is not that half the thoughts of half the time is good. No, he's saying this is considered thoughts of the whole time, because even though I did it in silence, but it's considered like the whole thing because that was the first one. Gemara asks, Mimai, how do you know that this is the reason for Reb Meir? It says, Midiktani, because it teaches Lafikach Hamnasan Kulan Ketikna, Vachash Lake Ketikna, Pasalvein by Karas. The Mishnah says that if you do one properly and one improperly, then it's puzzle. Now, where was the improper one? Second. One properly, ketiknan, means properly. Vachash shalei ketiknan, one improperly, that means one of the applications was done with the proper thought, and the second application was done with the improper thought. So then it's puzzle and it's not pigel. The Gemara's medayik. Achash shalei ketikna, v'kulan ketikna. Let's say it was done the opposite. The first one was improperly, and the ones after that were properly, what we call b'shtika, without any thoughts. So then, pigel. Say it is pigel. Mani, who could this be? Who would hope we're being medayik? This is the opposite of the way we explained it. We're being medayik, that it's only because the first one was good, but not if the first one was bad. If the first one was bad, then we would say that it would actually be pigel. Mani, who holds this? Ilim Rabbanan. If you say the Rabbanan, it's impossible to be the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan would never say pigel unless the Rabbanan said clearly that you need to have thoughts throughout the whole thing. So it must be Reb Meir. It must be Reb Meir. If you would say that it's because you can make pigel even with thoughts about half of the applications of blood, afilu kediktani, even if it would be the way that it was written in the Mishnah, which is ketiknan. First it was done properly, and then it wasn't done properly. Nami, the same talacha would apply. If mafaglim b'chatzi amate, then why does Reb Meir say that it's pasul? If it's Reb Meir, why does the Mishnah say pasul? It should say pigel. If you don't need every application to be done, you only need one of them. It must be. Must be the reason why it's pasul was not because mefaglim b'chatzi amate, not because you don't need every application. It's because of the order that it was done. You need to have the first one should be invalid, pigel. Then afterwards, then the whole thing would be pigel. But if the first one was valid, and then afterwards, then it's only going to be pasul, not pigel. Where it says, well, that was our proof. That's our proof to Rish Lakish. Or maybe this is Rish Lakish himself saying this. Amar Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak. Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak steps in. He says, L'yolam Rabbanan. Actually, our Mishnah could be the Rabbanan. You don't have to say our Mishnah is Reb Meir and come up with the support to Rish Lakish to say that it has to do with Al Das Rishaynahu Oisa, that everything is following his first thought. Really, it could be the Rabbanan. Maite Ketiknan, what does it mean that when we say the word properly, it's actually the opposite of the way we're explaining it. means ketiknan lepigel. It was done properly for pigel, like perfect pigel, which means that his first thought was for pigel, and then his second thought wasn't for pigel. And we're saying that it's not pigel because ein mefaglim b'chatzi amater, it's only halfway. According to the Rabbanan, you need to have thoughts through and through. It really could be the opinion of the Rabbanan. And then you lose the whole Rish Lakish support for Reb Meir, that Reb Meir is saying that it's al das rishayno waisa. It's not, that's not the word das rishayno waisa. Actually, the first thought here is actually the pigel thought. One asks on this 1 second. Shmuel Bar Yitzchak's attempt. If you look at the words, it says the first one was done ketiknan properly. Shmuel Bar Yitzchak wanted to learn that it means properly for pigel. And then it says, and one was done shlei ketiknan. We say it's pasul, vein beikaris. But it implies, what did it mean shlei ketiknan? Not properly, according to Shmuel Bar Yitzchak. It meant silently. The first one was thoughts of pigel. Shlei ketiknan means without thoughts of pigel. Michlal. But that implies the tikna lachshiru hudasa, that when it says properly, it's coming to make it kosher. See, when it says that achas shalei ketiknan, we mustn't call it ketiknan. The achas, there's a correction here. 1 second.
But where is it? Tzarech Yetikna.
Okay. Ketiknan, okay, that's fine. Okay, that's not a problem.
No, maybe it means one versus more than whatever.
Problem is, the way Rashi is putting it, is that shaloi ketikna means not properly, and we wanted to learn, Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak wants to learn that it means not properly for pigel. Problem is that he's actually not having any thoughts. It's just shtika. We don't like the term shaloi ketikna, not properly, when he's not having any thoughts. Shaloi ketikna is either not properly because he's having thoughts of pigel, which is contrary to Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak, contrary to the way Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak was explaining it, right?
Yeah.
We are singing about Mim Kaimai.
In Rashi, continue. Next line.
That's going to be the next. The Gemara is going to switch something. Okay, so here we're rejecting based on the language. The pshat of Reb Shmuel Bar Yitzchak that ketikna, which means properly, the way it's supposed to be means wait pigel
Make
is
it kosher.
and
Not pigel.
We're changing it. We're saying that it needs to mean the way it's making kosher, and not the way it's making pigel.
Right.
And the reason for that is because we don't like the wording of va'achas shaloi ketikna to mean in silence, not properly meant in silence. So if it was having thoughts that would invalidate it, then you could say achas shaloi ketikna. But just in silence, you can't call that shaloi ketikna, not properly.
So is this a mitzvah to talk about to talk it?
Yeah. According to Rashi, the kohen would have to say it out.
It's a tradition.
What he would be doing.
So is it like, it says the Kohanim would chant, what are those phrases? Yeah.
Not exactly, but similar. This is what they shout in the matzah bakery. They say l'shem matzahs mitzvah, shem matzahs mitzvah. Someone that's like encouraging everyone to
stay focused.
So it'll be like chanting this,
Not to have other machshavas.
Right. Okay. So we reject this. We reject this pshat. However, comes along Rava. Amar Rava, really, you could go back to Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak's pshat. You could say that it doesn't mean shtika. It doesn't mean that he was quiet, shaliketiklim, because that didn't make sense. That the word wasn't done properly. He did it not properly, and he meant in silence, because that would not be called not properly. That was just in silence. Rather, what it means is, my shaliketikna means chutz l'mkaiman, that he had thoughts of out of the allotted place. So the way it would work would be like this, according to Rava. Explaining
It's
Reb
also
Shmuel.
not pigul.
Right, explaining Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak was the first, the initial ones were done ketiknum properly for pigul. And then afterwards it was done shaliketiknum, which means not properly for pigul, which meant it was thoughts out of the allotted place instead of out of the allotted time. Okay, the problem with this is that we don't have an explanation for Rish Lakish. All of this was explaining how it's not Rish Lakish, how it's that it's not Reb Meir, it's the Rabbanan over here. Rish Lakish was explaining Reb Meir. Now the Gemara says, Ravashi Amar, Ravashi says that really Shleit Ketikna means Shlei L'Shmai. Shlei L'Shmai means that you had intention for another carbon. So that's another teretz. So that would explain why it's not Reb Meir, it's the Rabbanan. And why is it in other words, his first thoughts were pigul. According to Rish Lakish, first thoughts are pigul, then everything follows the first thoughts. One second, let me see. Yeah, Rava and Ravashi are all following the same flow, that really it's the Rabbanan. They're explaining Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak. They're explaining why is it only pasal and not pigul? We're explaining
Because we want to keep the first thought concept still.
But no, they're explaining. They're explaining the reason why it's pasal not pigul is because it was chatzi mater, which is the opinion of the Rabbanan. It's only half of the allowing, half of the permitting service. Gemara now asks, according to Rava and Ravashi, this implies the chila yavidla put some kaimer shlei l'shmai mechayev. Comes out. Comes out is that if it would only be the first thoughts were pigul, according to this. When the Mishnah says "Bikachem nasna achas ketikna," or kulan ketikna, properly, that meant properly for pigul. And then it goes on and it says "V'achas shleit tikna," that would mean that it was shlei l'shmai or it was chutzim kaimai. That would make it pasal, but not pigul. But let's say it wouldn't be chutzim kaimai or shalei l'shmai. It would just be in silence. Then it would be chayiv. It would be chayiv kares someone that would eat that because it would actually be pigul. Now, if that's the case, then it can't be the chachamim because the chachamim said
right.
So the Gemara answers, I did Tani Reisha, Pigol, V'chayavan of Karis, and Namiseifa, Pasal, Vein by Karis. The truth is, we were explaining it now, is that really it would be Pigol as well, even if it was done silently. But why did you write it in a way that implies that if it was done silently, then
it's different?
It would be Pigol. Really, if you do it silently, it also won't be Pigol, because it's only Chatzi Amater. But you wrote it in a way that it's pasal, but it's mashma that if you did it differently, then it would be pigul. It says, no, that was just because in the ratio we said that there was pasal and pigul. So over here we call it pasal, not to be medayik from it that if you did it any differently, it would be pigul. Okay. Not that you should be medayik, that if you did it b'shtika, then it would actually be pigel. Okay. Doesn't prove anything about following the first thought. So it's a question, we leave off with the question on Rish Lakish. We don't have a real support for Rish Lakish. Now the Gemara asks a real question on Rish Lakish, Meisvei. So far we just removed the support. Meisvei, Bamed Dvarim Amurim, there's a question, when do we say that one application of blood would make it pigel? If it was put chutzos manai, that's b'dvarim anitanam al mizbeach hachitzim. That's referring to the blood that was put on the outer altar. Aval damram anitanam al mizbeach hapnimi, but blood that's put on the inner altar. Going, for example, arba'im v'shalish shel Yom Kippurim, 43 applications of blood on Yom Kippur. Let me just tell you what these are. There's two sets of 8, 1 above and 7 below. That's a total of 8. 2 sets of 8 that went bein habadim, between the staffs of the aron. That's of the bull and the goat. Par v'sar. So 2 sets of that means that there's 8 plus 8 is 16. Then you had 2 sets of sprinkling in front of the parechas. That's another 16. Once above and 7 below, once of the bull and once of the goat. That's a total of 32. Then you have the application of the blood on the 4 corners of the inner altar. Mizbeach hapnimi. 32. That would be 36, right? Now, which blood was that? That was actually both bloods mixed together. And then you had the blood from the blood that was sprinkled on the top of Altiarai on the top of the inner altar 7 times. So 36 plus 7 is 43. All right. Both of those, the blood was mixed. That's the way we're learning it now. We'll see later that it's not. There's a machlekes about that, and the number is going to change if the bloods weren't mixed. Here we're saying that the blood of the goat and the bull were put together for those last applications. I didn't say a bracha, right?
So what's meisvei? What's the question?
Yeah.
Patience.
Right,
we're not holding. Wait. It's you have to. You'll see. So when the application of the blood is in the inner altar like that, or the 11 applications of the Parkein Mashiach, which is also 4 and 7, which is 11. Or the 11 of the Par Helm Davar Shel Tzibur, which means the community that first one was if the Kohen sins, right? The Kohen Gadol sins, the blood is brought inside. The second one is the Par Helm Davar Shel Tzibur, if the congregation sins, the blood is brought inside. So in Pigel, I mean, he has thoughts of Chutzlas Manai, Bein B'Rishayna, whether we're talking about the applications of blood that went inside the sanctuary, inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, Bein B'Shniya, whether he has thoughts of the application of blood which is put on the parechas, Bein B'Shlishis, whether he has on the third one, which is the thoughts on the altar, Reb Meir Reimer, Pigel v'chayav alav kares. Meir says Pigel and it's chayav kares. Now what the Gemara is asking now, we didn't finish the brisa, but what the Gemara is asking, according to Reish Lakish, what makes Pigel, according to Reb Meir, not that he holds Chatzi Amater, not that he holds partially.
The first
really,
one.
it's only because the first one. But over here, the way we listed it is whether he has thoughts on the first one, whether he has thoughts of the second one, whether it's the third one, all of those would create Pigel. It must be that it's not the first that makes it Pigel, it's the partial that makes it Pigel. It doesn't need to be the first. Kashan Reish Lakish. Okay. But the Chacham argue on Reb Meir, and they say, Ein b'kares at she'yifaga b'chol hamater. They say, no, you need to have kol hamater. Katani miyah, Nevertheless, it was taught in this price. Pigel bein b'rishain and bein b'shneim bein b'shlish. So Pollock, Rameir argues. Rameir says that that's considered pigel, even though it was not the first application of the blood. That means that it must be that he holds that it's chatzi amater, not the first. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Barabin. Rabbi Yitzchak Barabin explains we have a very interesting case here. It is talking about the first application of the blood, even though it's in the middle. How's that possible? Explains, Kugoin, for example, that shepigel b'shchita. Now, you have to explain what's happening. It's like this, that once the application of the blood was done in the sanctuary, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, then you already fulfilled that application of the blood, and you would not have to go back even if the rest of the blood's spilled. You would bring another carbon, and then you would only do the application in the heichal. Wow. On the process. In other words, once you did that, you're set. So what's happening is that the blood spilled after the first application, and then he needs to bring another carbon to be able to do the next one. And in the next carbon, he has thoughts of pigol in the second application of the blood, but it's not that it's the second one which is in the middle. It's the second one which is the first of this new carbon. And it was, where did he have the thoughts? He had thoughts by the shechita of the new. That's what he's saying. Shepigel b'shchita, of the second sacrifice that he had to bring because the first one spilled. And the chad materu, because that is considered just one mater, and it's a pigel of the entire avodah. Yeah, according to Rish Lakish, we were saying that Rameir really holds that it can't be pigel b'chatzi amater. Can't be pigel b'chatzi amater. He holds like the Chachamim. You need to have pigel throughout the whole thing. So then, how was it pigel? If Rameir's arguing on the Chacham, so because the first one is considered like the whole thing. That's what we will learn, right? Rameir really holds that you need to. Now we're explaining, Rameir Taka holds that you need to have the whole thing, but this is a brand new sacrifice, and in this sacrifice, it was the whole thing.
Because if you make a mistake, you stop and you burn it outside, right?
Yeah.
So you start over. But if you make a mistake later, now you have a shaila.
The first one was done already. The first part was done. So therefore, you're only, when it says shnia, it's talking about because you only needed to start from where you left off. Yeah, that's like filling out these long applications online where they say save and continue later, right? So okay, now the Gemara says, "Ihachi, my time of the Rabbanan. What's the reason for the Rabbanan? If it was pigel b'shchita, so why did the Rabbanan say? If the Chachamim say ein b'kar sachi yifaga b'chol amater, according to the case that we just said, it is b'chol amater. It was in the shchita."
Oh, so if there is a checklist, remember you said once that might have been a checklist.
Right.
So the checklist is only checked off after you finished everything. They say, "Oh, how do you do on the beginning?" "Oh, I did good. Now it's all done already."
Right. But here we're saying that the shchita would be enough. He did the entire shchita. Each one of these is each avodah is a full avodah. When we were saying the bechatzi amate, that meant that it needed to be the entire avodah. If it was applications of blood, it needed to be all of the applications of blood, right? Here was a full shchita that you had the thoughts. So Amar Rava man chachamim. Rava says, who's the chachamim that say over here that it's not considered pigel because it's not the entire mater? It's Rabbi Eliezer here. It's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. The Tanan, as was taught, is this the Mishnah that's coming up on the next page?
This is Rabbi Eliezer.
It's Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes. No, it's not the next page. They were going to have something similar to this on the next page, but not Rabbi Eliezer. I'm sorry? Switches it to Eliezer. Eliezer or Elazar?
Elazar. It says in Shittim Mekabetzis over there.
That's Rabbi Elazar. Okay. Rabbi Elazar, the Tanan. Rabbi Elazar is not so common in the Mishnah. That's Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. Rabbi Elazar in the Gemara is very common. In the Mishnah, he's not common. Rabbi Elazar in the Gemara is Rabbi Elazar ben Pedas, which is a student and a friend of Rabbi Yechanan. Very common. And Rabbi Elazar in the Mishnah is one of the students of Rabbi Akiva, which is Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel. Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah is Rabbi Elazar ben Horkinus. So anyway, it says here, Rabbi Elazar the Tanan, HaKaimetz v'alabayna v'akteris minchas kaina Mashiach minchas nesakim shehikriv me'achas mehen kazayis v'chutz chayev. Rabbi Elazar Paiter ad sheyakriv es kulan. But here he says that if someone does the kaimetz, or the levina, or the ketairas, or the minchas kaina Mashiach, any of these types of menachas, that one kazayas of them was brought outside the temple. So the Tanakama holds that they're chayev. Rabbi Elazar says you're exempt until you bring everything outside. It has to be entirely brought outside, which means that Rabbi Elazar holds that in order to be chayev for something, it has to be entirely. And what he's saying over here is that it needs to be the service that completes, that's the final service, the final avodah of everything. So the shechita wouldn't be enough. It would need to be, what's the final avodah? It need to be in the sprinkling of the blood. This is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion that the shechita of it wouldn't work. Okay, the Gemara says, one second. Rabbi Elazar agrees. You see, what we just said was a bunch of carbon minchas, and we were saying that if it didn't have a matir, if it wasn't the final service, or if it wasn't the entire final service, Rabbi Elazar would say that you're pater. Now, comes along Rabba and says, yeah, that's by a carbon mincha. Rabbi Elazar would agree that when it comes to the sprinkling of the blood, animal sacrifices, that it would be different. That you'd be chayev even if one kazayas was brought outside the temple. Now, the Tanan, as it was taught in the Mishnah, that if the blood of the bull of Yom Kippur spills after you did part of the applications of the blood in the sanctuary, it says in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it says Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say. That's why the Shita Kumetzis switches in, because Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon would not be speaking together. It would be Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon that would speaking together. They're two friends.
Nice.
Yeah. So Mimakim Shepasak Mishamu Maschel. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say that you don't have to go back and restart the whole application. It's funny, application, like application on the computer. You don't have to restart the whole application of the blood. You can just start from where you left off. So if that's the case, the same thing would apply to pigul, that one application of blood after, wherever you left off, that would be considered the entire, that would be considered pigul, that would be considered the entire avodah. That's the case, that you would only need one application, then the shechita would also work. If the pigul thoughts by the shechita should also be...
Well, you can't shech twice.
Well, we're talking about, actually over here you can, because the first part of this carbon was done and the blood spilled, so you shechted once for that. Now you brought in a second one to do the other application. In the second shechita,
that's the full maybe shechita. You can do the blood twice or somehow.
That's the full shechita, and so that really should be pigul according to this. According to the Chachamim, which we're now saying is Rebbe Elazar. If you want to say that we're talking about, if you want to learn it the way we're learning it, notice, if you learn it the way we learned it originally, that Bein Berishayna, Bein B'Shniya, Bein B'Shlishis is talking about the application of the blood in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the sanctuary, on the Mizbeach, on the Prechus, and then on the Mizbeach, then we lose the pshat. Then Reish Lakish loses his pshat in Reb Meir. So we were saying that's not the pshat. We're talking about that. We're talking about where the animal, you had to bring a new sacrifice. So Elam Rava, rather Rava says what we're talking about here is that Goin shepigel berishayna v'shasek b'shniya v'chazer pigel b'shlishis. I know that Reb Meir holds like Reish Lakish. We're saying we're answering Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says that Reb Meir holds that you need to have, in order for it to be pigel, you need to have thoughts originally, right? So, and then everything follows that. So what we're talking about here is Bein Berishayna, Bein B'Shniya, Bein B'Shlishis means that he only had thoughts in the original application, then he was quiet in the second one, and on the third one he had thoughts again. So now we come to a machlaikas. Remeir holds
it's not chetzi. But the Rabbanan.
So Mao the Tame, I could have thought that over here maybe you don't say al das rishayna, which is what the way Rish Lakish explained Remeir. If you would say that you follow the first thoughts, then mihad the pigul b'shlishas normally. Why did he have to have the same thoughts again on the third one?
Right.
You already had the thoughts in the first one. Kamash Malon, it comes to tell me that everything is al das rishayna. Okay. Maskefla Ravashi says as a question, midi shasa ketani. You're making up what the Bryce is talking about. It doesn't say anything about being quiet in the second one. How could you say we're talking about that you're quiet in the second one and it has to do with al das rishayna? Elamar Rashi says no. He says actually, you had thoughts in all of them. 1 second. So why is there a machlekes here? Because in the fourth one, we're dividing up the application on the altar, which was on the altar there were two applications, the inner altar. One was on the corners, and there was altir reshal mizbeach, the 7. There were 4 on each corner, then there was the 7. And then the fourth one he didn't. So the mayor holds that the first 3 are going to invalidate it because they everything is al das rishayna. Maris explains, why do we have to say that he had thoughts in the second and third? Why do you have to say thoughts in second and third if everything follows the first thought? You only need it in the first. Well, you could have thought that if it would enter your mind to say that he does everything based on his first thoughts, why do you have to have thoughts in the second and the third? It must be that he doesn't want to have just one initial thought that would make everything follow. Kamash Malan saying that nevertheless it's following the first thought. The Gemara asks, Bain Katani. It doesn't say that you had in all of them. Barishayna Shniya Shlishas. It says Bain Barishayna, Bain Bishniya, Bain Bishlishas. The Gemara says, you have a good point, Kasha. You're right, that's going to be a problem. Okay. Amar we taught in the Brisa, and one of the ways of explaining that Brisa was that Mefaglim B'chatzi Amata, Reb Meir holds that you can have pigel B'chatzi Amata. So Reb Meir Aimer, pigel v'chevon of kares. It's pigel and chayiv kares. And the reason why you chayiv kares is because you didn't need to have thoughts on all of them. Even if only some of them were with thoughts of pigel, that was enough to make it pigel. It says Michdi. This is like a very general question that what the Gemara is asking, like a fundamental question. If you would stop the sacrifice right in the middle and say, oy vey, I just messed up. I had thoughts over here of pigel. I'm not doing the rest of the sacrifice. So the sacrifice would not be pigel. The only way a sacrifice is pigel is if everything is done correctly, except for that one thought. But if you stopped in the middle, you didn't continue, you didn't finish the applications, you didn't do whatever you're supposed to do, and the sacrifice would be invalid, so then it won't be pigel. So the Gemara says like this, what happened over here? He had thoughts at one point of pigel, but it only becomes real pigel, that it's kares, until you until you continue applying the blood for the rest of them. Damar Mar learned in another brisa, kartzas kasha kachatzas pasel. The same way the appeasement takes place on a sacrifice that's valid, so too it becomes pigel the same way. The only way that it becomes kosher is when you finish everything. So also when it comes to invalidating it, we're calling it an appeasement of to make it pigel until you bring everything. Now the problem is, here's the fundamental question. Listen to this. But cave and the chashiv bei bifnim psula, since he had thoughts of this in applications of blood, which is brought inside, and so there in the kodesh hakadashim, and therefore it became pasul. So what does he have to do? He has to go sprinkle the rest of the blood all over the place, right, on the pareiches and on the altar, and on this he has to continue But that blood was already there. We know what's going on with this sacrifice. It's already pigel.
Hustle. Yeah.
It's as if he's not sprinkling anything because it's already pigel. And when he's sprinkling now, it continues, he's really only sprinkling water. We're calling it water. We mean from a non-valid sacrifice.
So he's not finishing.
So he's never finishing. He's never finishing it. So Amarabba, Mishkachasla, Ba'arba Paramadalat Sirim. Do you remember how we explained it? That if the blood spilt and then you could bring another sacrifice, and from the second sacrifice, the only way that it would be pigel would be if the
After
blood
4?
and you didn't actually sprinkle the blood, finish bringing the blood, but you brought another bowl for the next application. You brought another bowl for the next. So each one was considered an entire application of blood. Big chiddush. Rava says, Rava says, whoa, who was this? That was Rabbah. Rava says, that's never going to happen, right? Rava says, you could really say that it's really one bull and one goat, like a regular carbon. And Rava says, even though the application of the blood is not considered a valid application, but it's valid enough to make it pigel. Make it pigel, it's considered valid. Yeah. Remember that story with there was someone that was converting, and they said someone that's converting not allowed to keep Shabbos, has to break Shabbos.
With the handkerchief?
So he has to do something, a malacha. So there was a guy that would do a malacha every Shabbos. He would do turn on the light or something. But turning on the light would only be a malacha if he needs the light. Why is he doing it? He's doing it because he doesn't want to keep Shabbos. And so that's called a malacha shein tzricha legufa. It's a malacha that you don't really need. You don't really need it. It's machlekes if that's considered a malacha. So they asked the Rav, is he really violating Shabbos when he's turning it on because he doesn't really need it? He doesn't need it. So he said for the convert he can rely on the Rambam that holds that it's a malacha.
Oh.
The Rambam holds malacha shein tzricha legufa. Anyway, over here we're saying, yeah, I know it's not really pigel. It's not really sprinkling the blood. It's really sprinkling water. But for pigel, it's considered sprinkling blood. Okay, we're going to go back to explain the number 43 that we had of the applications of the blood for the Yom Kippur sacrifices. It says Aboim v'shalish, Batanya Aboim v'sheva. But we have another source, a brisa, that says that there's not 43, there's 47. It says Hakamanda Amar Ma'arvin lekronis, Hakamanda Amar ein Ma'arvin lekronis. It's a machlekes. Were the two bloods mixed for the application on the corners? So we said there's 43, but that's because we mixed the blood of the bull and the goat. But if you didn't mix the blood of the bull and the goat, then you would have an extra 4, which instead of 43 would be 47. But Tanya Arbaim B'Shmaina, you have another opinion that says it was 48. Where are you going to get one more application from? So the Gemara answers, Commanda Amar Shirayim Ma'akvin, and Commanda Amar Ein Shirayim Ma'akvin. There's a machlekes. If the pouring of the blood on the remaining of blood on the outer altar, on the base of the outer altar, that's considered essential for Yom Kippur. And if it is, then there would be, instead of 47, there would be 48. Okay. Theoretically, there could also be, instead of 43, 44. Now the Gemara says, we're asking another question on Rish Lakish, that Reb Meir didn't hold, according to Rish Lakish, Reb Meir didn't hold Mefag Mechatzi Amater. He held something else. He held that you always follow the initial thought. Meisvei, Bamedvar Mamurim. When do we say that something is considered pigel by a carbon mincha? That's only the kmitza. That's only at the time of the kmitza when he's doing the scoop. B'matan keli, when he's taking the scoop and putting it into the vessel. B'hilach, when he's walking it up to the altar. Aval b'oloi laktara, when it comes to the actual burning of it, you actually put it on the fire. If he has he burns this one with thought and this one with silent, the kaimet scoop. Or he does the kaimetz b'shtika silently, which means the first one he does silently, and the second one he does with thought. Reb Meir says it's pigel. Now 1 second. According to Rish Lakish, it wasn't pigel because Reb Meir held It was pigul because what you always follow the initial thought, and over here the initial thought was not pigul. So obviously Rish Lakish doesn't get the sheet of Reb Meir correctly. But Chachamim, the Chachamim say by pigul at shifag b'chol mata. We know the opinion of the Chachamim. Need to have thoughts throughout the whole thing. Ketani miya. Nevertheless, we learned as a kaimitz b'shtika v'salavayna b'machshava. Upalik. Reb Meir argues about that. He says that it's pigul, even though what happened? The first burning of the kaimitz was the burning of the kaimitz was silently, without thoughts of pigul. It was only the levina which was pigul. And so why would Reb Meir argue according to Rish Lakish? The Gemara says, Ema, we can answer Rish Lakish. Kvar nasan es levina machshava. He did it out of order. He did the levina first. I know the way it was written is a kaimetz b'shtika levina machshava. We mean to say kaimetz b'shtika ukvar hikter es levina b'machshava nasan es levina machshava. The Gemara says that is impossible because chada dahainu reisha. First of all, that's exactly the first case of nasan es kaimetz machshava es levina b'shtika. It's exactly the same case where you had the first thoughts of this. V'oid patanya v'achakach. We have another brisa that says clearly, and afterwards. Gemara says, yeah, that's a good point. Kasha, leave that as a question. Okay, I guess we could leave it here. Up to the Mishnah.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
All those that need.